Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors meeting for Tuesday, May 2nd, 2017. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
President Breed.
Present.
Breed, present. Supervisor Cohen. Cohen, not present. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, present. Supervisor Fewer. Fewer, present. Supervisor Kim. Kim, present. Supervisor Peskin.
Present.
Peskin, present. Supervisor Ronan.
Present.
Ronan, present. Supervisor Safai. Supervisor Safai. Safai, present. Supervisor Sheehy.
Present.
Sheehy, present. Supervisor Tang. Tang, not present. Supervisor Cohen. Cohen, present. Madam President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any communications?
Madam President, we are in receipt of a communication from the Office of Supervisor Norman Yee informing the Board of his absence and requesting to be excused from today's meeting.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, is there a motion to excuse Supervisor Yee? Moved by Supervisor Farrell, seconded by Supervisor Kim. Colleagues, can we take that without objection? Without objection, Supervisor Yee is excused. All right, Madam Clerk, please read the
minutes.
Colleagues, are there any changes to the March 21st, 2017 board meeting minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve those minutes? Moved by Supervisor Ronan, seconded by Supervisor Farrell. Colleagues, can we take that without objection? Without objection, those meeting minutes will be approved after public comment. Madam Clerk, please read the consent agenda.
Items 1 through 3 comprise the consent agenda. These items are considered routine. A single roll call vote may enact these items. If a member objects, a matter may be severed and considered separately.
Please call the roll.
On the consent calendar, Supervisor Farrell. Aye. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Fewer. Fewer, aye. Supervisor Kim. Aye. Kim, aye. Supervisor Peskin. Peskin, aye. Supervisor Ronan. Aye. Ronan, aye. Supervisor Safai. Safai, aye. Supervisor Sheehy.
Aye.
Sheehy, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. There are 10 ayes.
Those items are passed unanimously. Next item, please.
Item number 4 is an ordinance appropriating approximately $4.8 billion of proceeds from the sale of revenue bonds or commercial paper for capital improvement projects to the Airport Commission for fiscal year 2016-17 and placing the total appropriation on Controller's Reserve pending receipt of proceeds of indebtedness.
Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, I would respectfully suggest that given the magnitude and size and length of this capital improvement project and the board's desire to continue to monitor over time, that we put this on Board of Supervisors Reserve, and I would like to make a motion to replace the Controller's Reserve with a Board of Supervisors Reserve.
Supervisor Peskin has made a motion, seconded by Supervisor Safai. Colleagues, can we take that without objection? Without objection, the motion is adopted. And on the item as amended, colleagues, can we take that same house, same call? Without objection, the ordinance is passed unanimously on the first reading. Next item, please.
Item number 5 is an ordinance to amend the administrative and environment codes to require that any new passenger vehicle procured for the city fleet be a zero-emission vehicle, absent a waiver, and that all passenger vehicles in the city fleet be zero-emission vehicles by December 31st, 2020, and to encourage selection of zero-emission vehicles in other vehicle classes as technology improves.
Supervisor Tang.
Thank you very much, colleagues. So this legislation before you, I also have some amendments that I think I shared with your offices. If you don't have a copy, please let me know. But essentially what our goal here is to try to get our city's municipal fleet to become more clean and green. And of course, first of all, trying to make sure under existing law in our environment code to reduce the amount of vehicles that we have for our municipal fleet for our city workers. And so the legislation that I introduced, I do have amendments today, but essentially wants to have our city's municipal fleet, light-duty passenger fleet, so it does not include trucks and so forth, anything beyond that, to become zero-emission vehicles by the year 2022, unless an exemption applies or a waiver is granted. Under existing law, public safety and emergency vehicles are already exempted, and so that will also apply in this case. And then the amendments that I want to propose for today would create a distinction between different requirements for light-duty passenger vehicles that park on city-owned property versus those that park on non-city-owned property. And so we have come to understand that currently we have about half of our municipal fleet parked on non-city-owned lots. That's something that we should probably address in the future, but that is our current state of things. And we have about 50% of our cars parked on city-owned lots. So the amendment I'm making today would say that if you're parked on a non-city-owned lot, first you must try to purchase or lease a zero-emission vehicle. But if you cannot, then you can obtain a waiver due to any operational challenges, such as through charging infrastructure, to purchase or lease a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. And if you are parked on a city-owned lot, then 75% of our fleet that is parked there must be zero-emission vehicle, and up to 25% may obtain a waiver to purchase or lease a plug-in hybrid electric due to operational challenges. And the date that we have proposed for compliance is by the year 2022, because based on our analysis of the non-exempt fleet that we have in the city, we retire about 100 vehicles every year, whether it's through retiring, we're selling, or we're purchasing new vehicles every year, about 100 of them. And we've calculated that by 2022, that would bring us up to about 150 vehicles that we're retiring or purchasing every year. One of the things I did want to point out in the budget analyst report, and I want to thank the budget analyst office for trying to do an update for today's board meeting, is that I know that there has been a lot of alarm about the cost of us trying to comply with this ordinance. First thing I'll say is that obviously during our budget process, as we're looking at every single department's budget, we will be analyzing and scrutinizing their equipment and making sure that every vehicle that they need is the right size that we need or that they should be purchasing or leasing. Right now, there's already existing law that says that we should be right-sizing our municipal fleet, but frankly, it hasn't been done. We've actually been going the opposite direction and have actually increased the number of vehicles that we have for our city employees. So in terms of the analysis in the budget analyst report, one of the things that has been cited is a range of the vehicles that would be impacted by this legislation. And I want to emphasize that the top range of 1,283 is not the top range. The top range would be actually somewhere around 744 vehicles. So I wanted to make sure that that was very clear. The second thing is that in terms of the cost analysis, for the different types of vehicles that we as a city could be purchasing or leasing, there was also a range there, and the top range included the BMW i3 vehicle, which actually is about 50% more expensive than the other zero-emission vehicles that are available on the market. So that's something that, again, I know has been, many of you have shared with me your concern about the cost, but I want to make sure we know that actually the BMW i3s are not on the list that departments can purchase from at the moment under our existing ordinances. So that is not something that is even possible. Thirdly, I wish there had been more in-depth analysis done around fuel usage in terms of what the annual savings could amount to, and I have provided some of you with that information, as well as what it would mean if we were to actually right-size our our municipal fleet. So that hasn't really been done, as I said, and I think that's something that we should all follow up on, especially during our budget deliberations. In terms of the charging and infrastructure costs, $16,000 was cited as a conservative estimate. However, I have interviewed some departments that do have electric vehicles or zero-emission vehicles. Some of them have said that it's cost them as low as $3,000. But especially given that my amendments today that I'm proposing many of them will probably utilize plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. And even if they were to plug in versus using the gas part of their car, those require level 1 chargers, which are the equivalent of your socket at home and what you would be charging and plugging into a wall. So those are some of the changes and the high-level kind of issues with the cost analysis that I had in a nutshell. But I would just say that overall, I think first, our city's goals are really to get us out of cars, even as city employees. Yes, when we're trying to go to meetings, we should use transit first if we possibly can. Secondly, we should make sure that our fleet is consisted of just the bare minimum number of vehicles that we actually need to have. And then thirdly, if we are going to have to drive cars, then we should try to get into clean and green cars as much as possible. Again, I do understand some of the challenges with charging infrastructure, and that is why I proposed the amendments today. But I am happy to answer any questions or entertain any other thoughts from my colleagues at this moment.
Thank you. Supervisor Tang, before I move forward with the amendments, could you explain the waiver and who would grant the waiver and the process?
Sure. So the waivers would be submitted to the city administrator's office, and I think I see someone here who just stepped in. But essentially, they will be mostly first evaluated on operational challenges, such as you can't access charging infrastructure. So that will be one of the primary concerns. Secondly, will be for any other needs that a department has. So, for example, if your department we do have actually already an exemption here if you're driving more than 100 miles on average. So, for example, if you are a PUC worker who needs to go over to another city, those exemptions are already built in. But there might be other challenges where inspectors might be out in the field for lengthy periods of time and can't access charging. Those would all be considerations that a city administrator's office would take into account.
But who would the city administrator office would have the sole authority to grant the waiver?
That is correct
Okay.
at this moment, yes.
Supervisor Tang has made a motion to amend. Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Farrell. Can we take the amendment without objection? Without objection, the amendment passes. Supervisor Kim.
Thank you, President Breed. And I just want to appreciate Supervisor Tang for your work on these amendments. And I know we just chatted before the meeting in terms of a number of the questions that I had. I just want to reiterate that I completely support the intent of this legislation and want to see the city move towards getting to 100% on electric cars and electric hybrid vehicles. And I appreciate the work that's been done on this. And I actually think that with the amendments, this is a much more conservative ordinance in terms of the cost. I think my question, which I asked before, was before supporting this is getting an understanding of what the actual cost would be. Now, I understand that it would be difficult to estimate the cost for the 50% of vehicles that are on non-city lots, but getting a range of what the cost would be to replace all the vehicles that are on city-owned lots.
Supervisor Tang.
So through the chair to Supervisor Kim, that's something that we are trying to work on right now with the budget office, actually the mayor's budget office. But like I mentioned to you, it is really difficult to figure out because we don't know how many waivers will be granted, how many might choose to do plug-in hybrids or maybe on their own will choose to actually adopt more of the zero-emission vehicles. So certainly it will be a range as well, but also it's something that our board will be taking a look at when we're looking at every single department's budget during the budget season, which is coming up soon.
So I understand that it'd be very hard to estimate the cost for the 50% of our city cars that are on non-city owned parking lots because it's possible that 100% of them will be exempt from this ordinance. But for the 50% of city cars that are on our city lots, that is a requirement through this ordinance. So I don't know if that cost can be estimated during the board meeting and we can continue the item until the actual cost comes forward. It doesn't seem like it'll be as much as what the estimates by our budget legislative analyst report had estimated, which, by the way, was eye-popping, and I definitely had concerns about that cost. But it would still be good to get an estimate of just the portion where we know there's a requirement to replace the vehicles on city-owned cars, on city-owned lots, what that would be. And it could be a range from minimum to maximum. So
Okay.
it would be great to get that information before voting on this item. The second is not a question for the author of the ordinance, but it's just some comments that I had. It's not actually to the author of the ordinance as well. But I just have to express my immense frustration with the city administrator's office that we have not actually complied with our own law on HACDO. And I remember working on this when I was on Budget Committee when I first joined the Board of Supervisors. We have a city car fleet that is inefficient and too large. And we had made a commitment to reducing our fleet by 5%. Instead, we have increased the number of vehicles by 3.5%. And one of the best ways we can reduce gas house emissions is not by buying all electric cars, but by reducing the number of cars that the city owns. And it's frustrating that we have a transit first policy and we expect our residents to drive less and take public transportation and bike more. And yet we don't have the same expectation for city workers that are primarily providing services in the city. Now I understand if you're leaving the city and county of San Francisco lines, it's important to have cars, but I imagine that we can actually reduce vehicle mileage within our city boundary lines and encourage other use. But this report alone says that we have 126 underutilized city light-duty passenger vehicles that could be retired today without any replacement. And so I think, I support the goal of the legislation. I know Supervisor Tang shares my feelings on this, but I think that we should be retiring cars as soon as possible, that we should be ending leases for these 22 passenger vehicles or terminating that lease as soon as possible. And that, of course, that any new cars that we replace existing cars with should be electric vehicles as well. I think just in the overall scope of the ordinance that's in front of us, I just want to make sure that we do the appropriate cost-benefit analysis of making sure the cost meets our goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, because of course there are many ways that the city can reduce those emissions, and one of them is clearly by reducing just the number of vehicles that we have in our city fleet. So I hope that I'll be able to work with Supervisor Tang and members of the Budget Committee to actually put some real teeth into seeing this reduction start to happen in this fiscal year before we approve any budget by the city administrator's office. I just think 5 years has been too long, and there is no excuse for us not actually following our own ordinance to reduce our city vehicle fleet size. And I know that that's there is agreement on that with the author of this ordinance. But finally, I just think it's important to actually know what the cost of this is before we finally approve it.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Supervisor Farrell.
Thank you, President Breed. I just want to thank Supervisor Tang and commend her for her work on this issue. I think Supervisor Kim, some of the things that you mentioned about our car sharing, our car fleet, a few years ago after legislation we all passed to the board regarding car sharing and mandating car sharing to reduce our footprint on our fleet here in San Francisco, and it's actually, those updated numbers are very troubling, to say the least. So I'm happy to work with all of my colleagues here on that issue. But specifically in terms of the recent push with Supervisor Tang around electric vehicle infrastructure and legislation here, I just think it is so important that we do this as a city. It's in terms of climate change and carbon emissions. And I will tell you now from personal experience, as someone who switched last year to an electric car, we just don't have enough infrastructure in the city, and there is absolutely zero reason from a cost perspective that we shouldn't be moving in this direction. And so I just want to, again, commend Supervisor Tang for taking the leadership on this issue, and very happy to support it.
Thank you, Supervisor Farrell. Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam President, and I, too, share the statements made by the previous supervisors that this is not only well-intentioned but necessary. I do come to it with a slightly different perspective, which is that insofar as, if the numbers are correct, we retire approximately 100 vehicles a year, and this would have us do that at a more ambitious rate. What I actually posit to you is that in the short term, it will not be environmentally beneficial, because if the budget analyst is correct and we are actually selling off city vehicles, those vehicles are going to be driven around by somebody else. So I think it makes more economic and environmental sense to allow these vehicles to be used to their useful lifespan and then replace them with zero-emission vehicles. I mean, every one of these machines that we create takes a huge amount of natural resources and energy to create. So to the extent that we are not buying something, the best environmental thing that we can do is to drive our existing fleet into the ground before we replace them. That's where I'm coming from. So I'm happy that these revisions are being made. I have not, in the few minutes that we've been here, actually been able to read all of these amendments that we passed. I'm happy to continue this conversation, but I am not prepared to vote for this as it is today.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. Supervisor Safai.
Thank you. Just want to reiterate some of the things that folks have said. I, too, am an electric car driver, and it is important to expand the infrastructure in the city. I want to commend Supervisor Tang for taking this on. I think this is a really important discussion. Having been a former city employee for the Department of Public Works, there is absolutely no way you can do your job in many of these agencies without a vehicle. So the idea that we're going to invest in having the opportunity to have clean vehicles and put the infrastructure in place, this also has the potential to be a job creator as well for a particular industry, and so San Francisco can lead the way. I think this is a matter of looking at refining the numbers a little bit more, and so I think that the amount of time that we can have to continue this item to further the conversation, to really drill down. One of the things that just jumped out at me, and I said this to the legislative analyst, was the idea that DPW is saying it's $16,000, or whomever said it was $16,000 a charger. That's more than I would pay as an individual homeowner to have a charger installed. So the idea that the city would be buying these in bulk and in mass, I have a feeling that we can probably get that number down and then refine the numbers a little bit better. So again, I think this is a very important piece of legislation. I think it gives us an opportunity to also access our clean energy that we're producing through Clean Power SF and Hetchetchy. So the more you use electric vehicles on clean power, the less harm you're producing for the environment. So I think this is ambitious, but it is needed, and I think it provides us with a really great opportunity.
Thank you, Supervisor Safai. Supervisor Ronan.
Yes, I want to thank you, Supervisor Tang, for leading the charge on electric vehicles. I serve on the Bay Area Air Quality Management District with Supervisor Sheehy, and by far the greatest impact on our air quality in the Bay Area is vehicle emissions. And so to make a dent in our air quality in the Bay Area, we have to make a dent on the amount of emissions in our vehicles. But I would ask that we continue this item and have a little bit more time to fully understand with the amendments that you made what the cost impacts are, because these were eye-popping, as some of us have mentioned, and putting it perspective with all of the issues that we're dealing with in San Francisco right now, from homelessness to affordable housing, and thinking, relatively speaking, the potential cost of this relative to all of those other very pressing issues, and sort of weighing the environmental benefits, really understanding and agreeing with some of Supervisor Peskin's comments. I want to support this, but I need more time to understand what those revised cost estimates are, and sort of what those impact. So we just ask for some additional time to fully understand those impacts.
Thank you, Supervisor Ronan. Supervisor Tang.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. And as I mentioned as well, I was very startled to see the cost estimate. But I do think that I've asked, again, the Mayor's Budget Office to relook at the numbers. And I would ask our president if we could delay the item at least to the later on in the meeting. And if we need to, if it's still not satisfactory, then, of course, we can consider a continuance. But one thing I forgot to mention in the amendments as well is that in several sections of this ordinance, we insert language around workforce development. And I had approached OEWD about this legislation and how it is that we could better work with their department and workforce development in particular to make sure that we are upskill training existing mechanics who work on our city fleet, but also help do partnerships, for example, between City College, so that we can train other people going through our workforce development program so that they get the skill sets that make them really competitive for jobs in the future. So you'll see that in about 3 different sections in this ordinance. So at this time, then, I would like to ask that we just continue this item until later in the meeting for now.
I think we can just move on to the next item and come back to it. And before we do that, Supervisor Tang, I just wanted clarification, and I'm not sure you could answer this, but it appears as if we have limited selection for electric vehicles. And I know that you mentioned BMW, for example, the i3 as an option, and it's not on the list for what the city could purchase. And what happens in the event that, because we will be really limited, I mean, you know, in terms of what we are able to purchase. Could you kind of give some feedback on what your suggestion is of how we deal with this transition with limited options?
Thank you for that question. So although I am saying we effectively need to remove 1 vehicle off this list, and actually really 2, because 1 is manufactured in Tennessee, and I know that we won't be able to purchase those moving forward, there are actually other vehicles that are coming onto the market. So actually we will have more options as the years go on.
And so there are other vehicles coming onto the market with no track record of their reliability in this arena.
I can't speak for that at the moment, but just know that technology is constantly improving, and so the vehicle prices are coming down. There's better range on many of the vehicles that are coming online. There are better chargers. In fact, there are actually a lot of smart chargers that are available at the moment. For example, you could charge even up to 100 vehicles into 1 smart charger. So a lot of the industry is changing, and we actually build into this legislation. We have language that says as technology continues to improve that we as a city can adapt to those. So we're not wed exactly to zero emission vehicles. It could, just battery electric vehicles. It could be other types as well. So like hydrogen fuel cell, for example. So we're trying to allow our city to be able to, again, adjust to and adapt to changing, improve technology.
And I, too, just finally want to say that I'd like to, like Supervisor Kim, I want to understand what this means in terms of the transition of vehicles as well as the projected costs related to that particular transition as vehicles go offline after, hopefully, their completely full, useful life, so that we... I guess just understanding the cost associated with this a little bit better could be really helpful with my decision on this legislation. And with that, we will go to our next item and come back to this item later on. Madam Clerk, please call the next item, item number 6.
Item number 6 is a resolution to approve the issuance of up to approximately $4.4 billion in aggregate principal amount of International Airport Second Series revenue bonds to finance airport capital planning projects, approving the issuance and reissuance of up to an additional $10 million in aggregate principal amount of International Airport subordinate commercial paper notes, and ratifying and confirming certain resolutions of the Board and the Airport Commission.
Colleagues, can we take this item? Same house, same call. Without objection, the resolution is adopted unanimously. Next item, please.
Item number 7 is a resolution to authorize the General Manager of the Public Utilities Commission to execute Amendment number 5 to the agreement for the new Irvington Tunnel Project Construction Management Services with Mott McDonald to continue providing services for the final construction and closeout of the tunnel, to increase the agreement by $350,000 for a total agreement amount not to exceed approximately $21 million, and for a total agreement duration of 7 years through April 14th, 2018.
Same house, same call. Without objection, the resolution is adopted unanimously. Madam Clerk, please call items 8 and 9 together.
Item number 8 is a resolution to retroactively authorize the Department of Public Health to enter into an amendment to a multi-year agreement for substance use disorder services with the State Department of Healthcare Services in the approximate amount of $59 million for the term of July 1st, 2014 through June 14th, 2017. And item number 9 is a resolution to authorize DPH to enter into a multi-year organized delivery system intergovernmental agreement for substance use disorder services with the State Department of Healthcare Services in the approximate amount of $129 million for the term through June 30th, 2019.
Colleagues, can we take these items, same House, same call? Without objection, the resolutions are adopted unanimously. Item number 10.
Item number 10 is an ordinance amending the planning code to add an option for the dwelling unit mix of large buildings in specified zoning districts to allow developers to have a mix of 2 and 3 bedroom units that result in no less than 35% of the total number of units, with at least 10% of the total number having 3 bedrooms, and making appropriate findings.
Same House, same call. Without objection, the ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading. Next item.
Item number 11 is an ordinance amending the planning code to clarify and consolidate language, delete redundancies, correct errors, base required off-street parking and loading areas on occupied floor area, and consolidate and update the multiple provisions for establishing the maximum quantities of accessory parking and making appropriate findings.
Same House, same call. Without objection, the ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading. Next item.
Item number 12 is an ordinance to amend the planning code to require a conditional use authorization for bars, liquor stores, and medical cannabis dispensaries on the first story and for personal services on the second story within the Noriega, Irving, Taraval, and Judah NCDs, and making appropriate findings.
Supervisor Tang.
Thank you. So this piece of legislation in front of you is actually a pull-out from a larger planning code cleanup that's roughly about 700-something pages. And we were pulling this out because it was something that our office had actually worked on for a very long time, and we sought to have these changes made permanent through the planning code cleanup originally. But since that has been held up for some time, we wanted to move forward separately regarding our District 4 neighborhood commercial corridors. So the changes were initiated many years ago when we first established our first NCDs on Noriega, Irving, Taraval, and Judah. Previously, District 4 did not have any neighborhood commercial districts that were named. And so at that time, we also looked through to see what sort of controls, based on community feedback, we should change given this opportunity. And so what we did was found that neighbors really wanted additional notification and hearing opportunities for bars, liquor stores, personal services, and medical cannabis dispensaries. And so it requires a conditional use for bars, liquor stores, and personal services if the personal service is located on the second floor, and medical cannabis dispensaries, obviously on the first floor. So there has been, I think, a lot of discussion around MCDs, and this was not designed to stop MCDs or to thwart any of those efforts. This was actually part of a larger look at all of the zoning in District 4 along our commercial corridors. This was sparked many years ago before any proposals were in place or so forth. And it, again, I want to reiterate, it does not prohibit or set a buffer zone for MCDs. This is simply about conditional use authorization for bars, liquor stores, personal services, and MCDs.
Thank you, Supervisor Tang. Colleagues, seeing no other names on the roster, can we take that item, same House, same call? Without objection, the ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading. Next item, please.
Item number 13 is a motion to approve the mayor's nomination for the appointment of Art Torres to the Municipal Transportation Agency Board of Directors for a term ending March 1st to 2021.
Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, colleagues. As you may have noticed, our colleague, Supervisor Fewer, has a serious case of laryngitis, so it is my pleasure to read into the record on her behalf the following. Colleagues, you may have noticed that I cast a dissenting vote on the appointment of Senator Torres to the Municipal Transit Authority Board at the Rules Committee meeting of April 26th. At the time of the vote, I had not had the opportunity to meet the senator in person and ask him questions about his desire to serve on the MTA board. This was due to my cancellation of a scheduled meeting because I was ill. As many of you know, the Geary BRT and the MTA has been of much discussion and concern in my district, and because of this, I felt I could not approve the senator's appointment without having a face-to-face discussion with him about the needs and concerns of my district. I am fully aware that the residents of my district would expect this of me as their elected representative. I am happy to say that I have since met with Senator Torres and am happy to approve his appointment today. I wish him much luck in his new role and look forward to working closely with him to serve the people of San Francisco and the residents of District 1.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. And with that, colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, the motion is approved unanimously. Next item, please.
Item number 14 is a motion to appoint Supervisor Aaron Peskin for an indefinite term to the Bay Conservation and Development Commission.
Well, I don't know. Colleagues, can we have a motion to excuse Supervisor Peskin? Moved by Supervisor Kim, seconded by Supervisor Farrell. Colleagues, can we take that without objection? Without objection, Supervisor Peskin is excused. Madam Clerk, on the item, please call the roll.
Supervisor Farrell. Aye. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Fewer. Fewer, aye. Supervisor Kim. Aye. Kim, aye. Supervisor Ronan.
Aye.
Ronan, aye. Supervisor Safai. Safai, aye. Supervisor Sheehy.
Aye.
Sheehy, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Cohen. Aye. Cohen, aye. There are 9 ayes.
The motion is approved unanimously. Madam Clerk, let's go to committee reports.
Item 20 was considered by the Land Use and Transportation Committee at a regular meeting on Monday, May 1st, 2017, and it was forwarded to the board as a committee report. Item number 20 is an ordinance to approve an agreement between the city and LMC San Francisco One Holdings, LLC, to allow the city to utilize a property at 1515 South Van Ness to operate a facility to provide temporary housing and services to homeless persons, to address encampments in the Mission District, to direct city departments to make repairs and improvements, and to suspend the competitive bidding embedded in the administrative code, and to affirm the CEQA determination.
Roll call vote.
On item number 20, Supervisor Farrell. Aye. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Fewer. Fewer, aye. Supervisor Kim. Aye. Kim, aye. Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Ronan.
Aye.
Ronan, aye. Supervisor Safai. Safai, aye. Supervisor Sheehy.
Aye.
Sheehy, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. There are 10 ayes.
The ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading.
And Madam President, I would have...
Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam President. I would have actually said at the outset that I am hopeful that this encourages all of us to look at potential temporary sites in each of our districts. I'm actually reminded that there is an affordable housing site in District 3, which I should probably talk to Mr. Kozitsky in the mayor's office about. That it's going to be a number of, I mean, if we can do a 6-month deal here, maybe we can do a couple of years on the Broadway site before it actually goes into development. So I just wanted to raise that and encourage all of us to look for similar sites.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. Supervisor Kim.
Thank you. I did want to say something, but I want to give Supervisor Ronan an opportunity to speak before I did on her item. But I just want to thank her for moving forward with this. You moved in lightning speed to make this happen, and I know it's not easy to tell your constituents that you want to put in additional shelter in your district, even though homelessness is such a clear crisis in all of our neighborhoods. And I want to thank Supervisor Peskin for also identifying a site in his district. I really think it's important for every supervisor on this board to identify a navigation center or some type of drop-in center shelter in their district. We all need to do our fair share, and I will be introducing a resolution asking for geographic equity when it comes to providing services for our homeless. Thank you.
And I should just add that I appreciate the comments of my colleagues, but I do think it's important that we don't make this about district. We make this about where people are actually homeless and where they're located and how we bring the support services to them. Because we want them to be effective, and we also have existing shelters that we can use as options for navigation centers. I mean, we all clearly care about trying to make changes to this issue, but I would prefer that we not see it politicized and we focus on doing what we need to do in those areas where it's most impacted, including many of our districts here. Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor Kim, for authoring such an important piece of legislation. I think it's incredibly important.
I'm sorry, I need to rescind the vote if we're going to have this discussion. Is there a motion to rescind the vote?
Yes.
Moved by Supervisor Farrell, seconded by Supervisor Cohen. Colleagues, can we take that without objection? Without objection, vote is rescinded. Supervisor Cohen, I apologize, colleagues, for not paying attention to that.
Thank you. I think it was your comment that I really wanted to address, President Breed. But Supervisor Kim, thank you for your acknowledgement. And Supervisor Ronan, I know it's a tough road right now. I was in your spot a year ago, and through a lot of neighborhood meetings and tough love and tough conversations, we were able to find a location that the neighbors, the businesses, as well as the city agreed upon. And it wasn't easy, but it can be done. I am excited that we're going to be opening up our navigation center soon. They tell me June, but you know, still waiting on PG&E to get it together, but that's another battle. But the point that I'm making is that homelessness touches every one of our districts. So I think it is important for us to meet people with where they are, but we cannot keep our head in the sand and pretend like it's not everywhere. It's on the Great Highway. It's in Golden Gate Park. It is on every nook and cranny. It's on the hills. It's under the freeways. It's in parks. It's near bus stops and bus shelters. It's on the street. I mean, it's just a crisis. And Supervisor Kim, you authored a letter, I think also last year, acknowledging that this is a crisis of a crisis proportion. And I certainly wish that our governor would recognize this and would present a budget that would allow us the resources that we as the city and county need in order to address appropriately this crisis that we have right here on the streets of San Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Cohen. Supervisor Ronan.
Colleagues, I wasn't going to get into this discussion given that all I do is talk about this navigation center at this site, and this is simply an acceptance of the gift from Lennar to use their site temporarily for a navigation center. But since we're opening up the discussion, I felt like I couldn't not weigh in. There are certain neighborhoods like the Mission, like the Tenderloin, like parts of Potrero and Bayview, where there is a public health disaster on our streets. People are living and dying in tent encampments everywhere, both from violence, from fires that are started. There are used needles littered all over our sidewalks, human waste on the street, people in acute mental health crisis that are not receiving the services they need, that are literally on people's front door. And I felt like I had to act immediately, that I can't wait for some future solution to this crisis, and so was able to negotiate this somewhat creative deal with very willing partners in Lennar multifamily communities and Calle 24, and then really just had incredible support and help from the mayor's office to quickly use this site temporarily for a navigation center, but we're going to be able to use it for only 9 months. And then we're going to need more permanent expansion to our temporary shelter beds. I am a housing first person. We need to build thousands and thousands of new units of supportive permanent housing, of clinics, in residential clinics for people in mental health crisis and with severe addiction issues. We need to do all of that, but we have a public health crisis on our streets at the moment, and we can't pretend that the 4 or 5 years that it takes to expand our permanent housing supply is the solution to what's happening every day on our streets. And so I believe we need to slightly alter our housing first policy and expand the number of temporary navigation center beds, shelter beds, call them what you will. The navigation concept is, they're still temporary beds like shelter beds. They just really meet the needs of the homeless population a lot better than our traditional shelter systems. But we need more of all of it. And we need it, quickly, and then we need it more on the long term. So I am already, in partnership with Jeff Kaczynski, looking for a permanent site in my district for when this one closes in 9 months, because it'll take at least 9 months to open that up. And that's what I really implore all of you to be doing in your districts, because while it is true that there are certain districts where there are a lot of services where homeless people congregate, this is a citywide issue, a citywide problem, and we all need to be participating in the solution. And what I hear from my constituents as their number one concern is the fact they feel like the Mission has to take all the brunt of the crisis. I remind them that the majority of temporary shelter beds are actually in District 6, 65% of them, and not in District 9. But the truth of the matter is District
6, 9, 10, and 5 are really the districts that have some temporary shelter beds in our districts, and the other districts don't. And we need to all take part in the solution and be working together to make that happen. So I am excited about your resolution, Supervisor Kim. I'm excited to hear Supervisor Peskin say he likes this idea of using these developments and the time in between as temporary navigation centers. We're testing it out, but hopefully it'll be successful and something we can replicate. But I do hope to see more geographic equity in terms of these essential services. We're all in this together.
And just to add, Supervisor Ronan, thank you for your comments, because after the first navigation center opened on Mission Street, when Supervisor Campos was in the seat, we have since in District 5, in the Haight, have tried to identify several locations in our district. It is a real challenge. It's easier said than done, because the other challenge that we ran into in working with some of the folks in the Haight, where we have a serious challenge of concentrated homeless individuals, was trying to get them to other places where there were shelter beds and them not wanting to leave the neighborhood. And fortunately, with a program like Take It to the Streets, I mean, we are housing over 60 individuals who are formerly homeless, but we're doing it actually in District 6, where we have an entire building, because we can't find a place, specifically in the area to support this amazing program that serves the Haight. So I think the point that I'm making is, we all know it's a crisis. We all know that it's a challenge. We all think it's important to do innovative things around this challenge in order to meet the need. But I'm not sure if it's as easy as saying we need to have a navigation center in every district. I think whatever locations we can identify, any place in the city that could serve for this particular purpose, let's figure out a way to move forward. You came up with an incredible solution, a very creative solution, and I commend you for your work on this. But it's also important that we look at what exists now and our shelter program, and whether or not those could be used as viable options. So this is definitely a longer conversation, and some of the comments that were made by my colleagues kind of sparked the discussion. But this here is something that's, we're moving in the right direction. We do, of course, need to move faster, because we've seen the results of some of the amazing work done at the Navigation Center on Mission Street, and we're grateful for that, and we want to see that continue for all the challenges that we have around homelessness in all of our neighborhoods in San Francisco. So thank you for your leadership. Supervisor Sheehy.
Thank you for your comments, President Breed. And I agree that this has become a huge crisis for us. For me in my district, the real challenge is that the policy of the Department of Homelessness has been to prioritize people who have been on the streets 10 years or longer. And the two of us, President Breed, actually share the same, in general, population type, which is young people. And when I try to engage the Department of Homelessness, I've been told, well, they refuse services. So it's not even clear to me. I would be supportive of having a youth-focused navigation center, and have tried to talk to the Department of Homelessness about, because they should not be put in with adults. But it may be that the first step with these young people is just a drop-in place. I mean, having started to unwind and talk about this problem, it's been really frustrating to me too, because if you look at the point-in-time count from 2015, 48% of these young people are LGBTQ. 13% of them are HIV positive. And the response I've had when I've asked hot teams to go out is they refuse services and just kind of walk away. So I'm glad that you've been able to develop such a successful partnership with Jeff Kaczynski, but it's been more frustrating in trying to get engagement on this critical issue, because it is a different population. I mean, some of these folks are minors, unaccompanied minors. And I guess I don't see why, kids who, a lot of them have heeded the call of Harvey Milk way back in the day, the kids from Altoona, Pennsylvania, the famous speech, but come here because they think they can find freedom and acceptance, and instead they're kind of just left on the streets because they haven't been homeless long enough. I have been working with providers. The Youth Commission had developed an outstanding set of recommendations 2 years ago to address this population, but it has been a particular source of frustration that this population has not been one that has been prioritized for activity by the Department of Homelessness. So hopefully that will change. And congratulations, Supervisor Ronan, on, because in a way, these things all run up to whether it's the Civic Center Navigation Center, which is a block from my district, or the current one on Mission Street, which again is a block from my district, and even the 26th one, I think you're only 2 blocks outside of my district there. So thank you for taking this on.
Thank you, Supervisor Sheehy. Supervisor Kim.
Thank you. Just now that we're talking about this issue, and I know that we'll have plenty of opportunity to debate this, I just want to reiterate the point of why I think geographic equity is so important. One, we need services everywhere. As Supervisor Cohen said, we have members of our homeless count that live in every nook and cranny here in the city. And frankly, people will go where the services are unless it is completely inaccessible, which I know that we experience with Pier 80, I believe. People will go where the services are. I hear over and over again from our constituents that, because our district bears the over 50% of the services for our homeless population, they are of course going to congregate in the district that I represent. And it's not that our residents are NIMBYs. They aren't saying we don't want these services. They just want to see it better spread around. But I will add this point. We have seen the greatest outcomes with our residents that are transitioning out of homelessness when actually they're outside of our district, when they live in other neighborhoods that are calmer, where they actually are able to get away from some of the low-level crimes and drug dealing that we see in the neighborhoods that I represent. We have seen some of the greatest outcomes when we have residents that move to neighborhoods like the Richmond, and that they're able to find peace and able to actually transition their lives in a very strong and wholesome way. So again, I really kind of have to push back on this. I think that the entire city needs to be a part of the solution, and I know that we can find sites in every part of the city.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Supervisor Ronan.
Yeah, I wanted to address a couple of the points that are coming up in discussion. One is that every single night in San Francisco, we have 1,000 people on the waiting list for shelter beds, every single night. And some people don't even get on the list because they think it's pointless, because they know there's already 1,000 people that are not going to have a bed that night. So there is this myth out there about people not accepting services, but if that were really the problem that we were facing, then we wouldn't have a 1,000-person waiting list every night for temporary shelter. Jane, Supervisor Kim, want to mention that Pier 80 in the beginning it was a little of a difficult uptick, but really. Soon after it opened, it was completely full every single night for the entire time that it was open. So your point about people will go where there are good services in the city is absolutely accurate and true. And when people are dealing with addiction issues, sometimes getting out of their immediate circumstance and communities is the best way for them to start to lead their lives on a healthier path. So I couldn't agree more. That geographic equity is incredibly important. And I will say that while Jeff Kaczynski and the mayor have been incredible partners on this, it's because I came to them with a fully baked plan. I mean, I have to say that this was not presented to me. I made it happen. And I found this space. I negotiated an agreement that included this space in it. And came to them and said, here's my plan, now partner with me to make it happen. And it would have never happened if it hadn't gone in that direction. So it is incumbent upon all 11 of us to take that leadership, to not just wait for Jeff Kaczynski or his department or John Updike to find our spots. We need to go out there proactively, identify spots, help get site control, and make it happen. I'm also in the process of working with our state delegation and Phil Ting, the chair of the Assembly Budget Committee, to look for state funds to open more permanent navigation centers because
and our budget director, Melissa Whitehouse, knows this, there is not enough money currently in our next budget cycle to fund new navigation centers. And if we do not expand our system, we will continue to have a public health crisis in our streets. We must expand the system, and therefore we need the funding to open new navigation centers. And it's hopefully something, certainly everyone on the budget committee will partner with me on demanding more money to be able to open these navigation centers. But it does take that proactive engagement on the part of the supervisor, the district supervisor, to make these things happen.
And just to add, Supervisor Ronan, I agree. And before Jeff even became the director of this department, me and my staff were working with Sam Dodge to identify a location. That's how long it's been. And it has been a really frustrating process, especially with the real estate and some of the other challenges that, exist all over the city. Not to say that that's an excuse, but it has been a lot really challenging for us in the Haight-Ashbury community, where I tried to focus on finding a location, even though there's still a possibility, and we're going to continue to work towards that goal. And I also want to add that, we talk about the homeless population as if it's a one-size-fits-all. Some people want services and they accept them. Others, and because I've been out there with the HOT team, I've been out there, with different programs, including especially taking it to the streets, which I absolutely love. And having the conversations, everybody has a unique story as to why they feel comfortable either being in a shelter or not being in a shelter, accepting support or help or not accepting support or help. And I just think that, again, there are a lot of different things that we are doing and we can continue to try to do to enhance in order to make sure that, again, we are meeting people where they are. And, we have a strong desire to want to address this issue. And we also should take the time to back up just a little bit and recognize some of the great things that are working. 2 years ago, those 63 people, it's either 62 or 63, they were living on our streets in the Haight-Ashbury. And now they're housed, they're cleaning up the streets, they're community ambassadors. They have a new life. They're working with folks in the community. They're cleaning up after 420. They're working with LavaMay with the shower system. Many lives have been changed. And I know that that doesn't put a dent in the issue, but there are some great programs that are making a difference. And so what we should try to figure out a way to do, like the navigation centers that we know work, is look at ways to expand the system and continue to do all we can to be a lot more aggressive and provide much needed funding in the areas that are working, and make the hard decisions of taking away money from those programs that are wasting money and not effective in doing the job. So that's my 2 cents. Seeing no other names on the roster, we can take this item again, same house, same call, without objection. The ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading. All right, Madam Clerk, it's 3 o'clock.
Item number 15 was scheduled pursuant to motion number 16164, approved on November 15th, 2016, for the Board of Supervisors to sit as a committee of the whole for a public hearing to hear and receive updates on the final reports, findings, and recommendations of the Blue Ribbon Panel on Transparency, Accountability, and Fairness in Law Enforcement, the Department of Justice Initial Assessment Report, the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing, and the Civil Grand Jury's Report, and requesting the Police Department, the Department of Human Resources, the Department of Police Accountability, and the Police Commission to report.
Supervisor Cohen. We're on the committee of the whole. Do you want to make a motion?
As we discussed previously, I'd like to make a motion to continue this item, colleagues. We are in the process of working with the police department to streamline the presentation of information so that we are not spending 2.5 hours as a committee as a whole, but we are making the most of our time. Madam Clerk, I would like to request to see if we are able to continue for 1 week. I'm under the impression that we are unable to continue to 1 week because there's a special item on the agenda.
Next week on May 9th, we have the mayoral appearance at 2:30, special commendation.
That's it, the special accommodation.
Yes, and we also have a 4 o'clock special CEQA appeal and a 5 o'clock
Right.
convening
So
hearing.
because the date is very congested, I'd like to look at a date in 2 weeks, please.
May 16th?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Thank you, colleagues. I appreciate it.
May 16th is special business commendation, so we'd have to work on a specific time. And just to be clear, colleagues, the concern I have is the last time we had the committee of the whole for this particular item, we also had special commendations, and we had people waiting in the chamber to comment, and the goal is we want to have a productive conversation without impacting those who are being recognized, as well as many of the folks who are presenting and providing comment.
Perhaps, President Breed, we can stick to the board chamber rules of 5 minutes for accommodations to honor this. My fear is that we let too much time lapse, we lose the momentum that we have generated in the since January on moving forward. Also, like I mentioned earlier, working with the chief and his senior staff member, the statistician, to ensure that the data that's being presented is concise, so that we can have a tighter meeting, a tighter hearing, as opposed to.
So how about May 23rd?
May 23rd. No. I'm sorry, May 23rd is not going to work.
Okay. June 13th? Or is that too late? If not, we'll go back to the May 16th date.
I'm sorry, I think I'm going to have to stick to the May 16th date.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
just for clarity, if we continue it to the May 16th date, can we decide on the time at a later time?
Yes, I'm definitely flexible on the time that we schedule it for in the chamber.
Okay.
On the agenda.
Supervisor Cohen has made a motion to continue the item to May 16, 2017, seconded by Supervisor Ronan. And if there are any members of the public who'd like to provide public comment, please come forward now. First speaker.
Board of Supervisors, this is a very important issue. And some of you may have forgotten that these chambers were packed when we had some joint sessions where 3 judges brought to your attention that our mayor did not fund the blue panel ribbon report. And what I see here is, and maybe I'm wrong, that the Board of Supervisors are not taking this seriously. Right now, if you look at our police commission, it's in disarray. We do not have a head, qualified person to look into the citizens' complaints. The grand jury was very clear on what had to be done. But many of you supervisors are not taking this seriously. So we advocates on the front line, we are doing our job. And you know that you all even refused to give us sufficient time during those joint hearings to speak. But we had to approach y'all in closed doors and make some deals so that y'all could give us a half an hour. Supervisors, this police commission, what's going on our streets, law and safety is being compromised. Take this issue seriously.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. David Carlos Salaveri for San Franciscans for Police Accountability. We are a bit disappointed that we're not going to be having the Committee of the Whole today. However, if it is on for May 16th, I would hope that there's a really tight agenda so that we know what's going to be discussed at the committee. We can therefore come prepared to give you our best shot at giving you information about what's really happening. We're looking to bring the district attorney to the committee of the whole. We think that that's very, very important because the Board of Supervisors has, of course, given the DA $1.5 million for his independent investigation department. And as far as we know, it's not up and running yet, because the issue of the memorandum of understanding with the police department is still very vague. We're not clear if an MOU has been issued yet, so that it's clear what the lines of authority are between the independent investigators of the DA and the existing SFPD when they investigate officer-involved shootings. So we're hoping that somebody can tell us where the hangup is on getting the MOU done. We're also very concerned about a new head for the DPA. We're not sure what the mayor's timeline is for making that appointment, or whether it's a commission issue or not. So, those issues, hopefully for the 16th, that we have a really tight agenda that's well publicized ahead of time so that we can make the meeting the most efficient. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. Since last December 7th, we've been commemorating the 75th anniversary of World War II and events thereof, and it's important that we remind people here in San Francisco of the important role that was played by this city at that period. I have here a cover from the Saturday Evening Post, which illustrates...
Sir, I'm sorry, this is not general public comment, it's just public comment.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
It's not general public comment, not just yet. It'll be coming up soon. This is on the hearing for the police accountability. So we'll be coming to general public comment soon.
This is a general comment, is it not?
Not yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not yet. We're almost there. Next speaker, please.
Jackie Barshak for San Franciscans for Police Accountability, and I am disappointed that the Committee of the Whole is not meeting today. However, on the 16th, the SFPD will be rolling out its budget for the police department, and at that time, they will have a line budget item for tasers, the electronic devices which we know to be tasers. And their appropriation for tasers is well below what the actual cost of tasers are in comparison studies with other cities and jurisdictions. So lowballing the actual cost to the city is not only in dollars and cents terms, but in human terms. And I urge you as supervisors to veto, to reject any appropriation for tasers, because tasers are lethal, they're dangerous, and they shouldn't be used in San Francisco. A recent poll that was done by the Chamber of Commerce that 78% of San Franciscans have weighed in that they prefer to have tasers, that the San Francisco Police Department use and have tasers. But in fact, that poll, the way it was phrased, was really designed to have a certain outcome, and that outcome is really part of a political decision by the Chamber of Commerce, which is a big advocate for lasers. So that poll should actually be discredited. So I want to just emphasize again that records show that police overuse and misuse tasers. And so, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
I realize this is not regular public comment, but I wanted to jump in on this because I remember months ago I gave a speech and I almost switched because this guy had a film on what happened here in San Francisco. Now, I've stated for many years the police, by and large, are the good guys, and it is I don't even know if I'd want to be a cop anymore nowadays. I don't even think I'd want to be president or a cop. I can't believe I just said that, but I did. Okay, but I saw the film. Okay, well, let me put it this way: if a cop he aims his gun at me and he gives me an order, and even if he doesn't aim his gun at me and give me an order, I'm going to do what he says. Okay, and if you don't do what he says, there's consequences. Okay, and the problem. So whoever We have to change the situation where the officers, when they draw their guns, okay, everyone had drawn their gun on this guy, and you could see he was disobeying orders. He kept walking, which was a stupid thing to do, and it cost him his life. But it was wrong for them to shoot him. They that was totally wrong, and so the procedure has to be changed. It has to be changed. So I know this. The Bible says that God is orchestrating everything. All the tragedies that happen, including that one, what's going on with now they're framing, I am certain Bashar Assad is innocent. They're framing that guy. They're doing the same thing to him as they did, 3 years ago to him, and 30 seconds. And so, but in spite of whether it's over there in Syria or here in San Francisco or what happened there in Oklahoma City, and by the way, I continue to tell police officers that the number one friend that they have is radio talk show host Alex Jones, because he's the guy that interviewed the cops in Oklahoma City when Bill Clinton slandered talk radio, slandered Rush Limbaugh. It was Alex Jones that talked with K9.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Michael Adams. I'm with San Franciscans for Police Accountability, and want to thank you for all you're trying to do to resolve some of these police community issues, including monitoring who you appoint to or who you cause to be appointed to the San Francisco Police Commission. I have an unabashed endorsement for Petra de Jesus, who is a stalwart in trying to maintain balance between the rights of police officers, the responsibility of police officers, the rights of citizens to live free and safe in this sanctuary city. And so I hope you will take a long look and not be rushed, as I witnessed at a previous meeting, into replacing someone without a process for really vetting all of the potential candidates. I endorse what has been said about the electrocution devices, benignly known as tasers. Those are electrocution devices, and they can cause harm and death. I want you to hopefully consider that. And I'd like to endorse the behavior of at least one commissioner one supervisor, Supervisor Peskin, who has made a point to try to bring out the best cops and honor them for the role model behavior that they are setting. We need data. We need data to establish that there can be scores kept in terms of how police officers are behaving. All of the bad cops get all the attention. Good cops need more, and they need to be rewarded and recognized. So we want to thank you for setting that model some time ago when those officers were chasing the suspect across rooftops and nobody died. So we appreciate the opportunity to appear when you have the joint session, and we'll do our best to be as helpful as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Tom Gilberti. The city is lucky to have San Franciscans for police accountability. They make the job a whole lot easier. I've just been, of late, watching them at the police meetings, and I have to applaud them. I kind of wish there were more of them. This is a time for re-envisioning. I'm going to use that word, and it's President Breed's word. And this is, again, a big moment to reevaluate, re-envision transparency, the police force, our city as a whole. So we need to take it seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other members of the public who'd like to comment, public comment is now closed. And Supervisor Cohen has made a motion to continue to the May 16th meeting of 2017. It was seconded by Supervisor Ronan. Colleagues, can we take that without objection? Without objection, this item will be continued to the meeting of May 16th, 2017. All right, Madam Clerk, let's go back to our item number 5. Supervisor Tang.
Thank you. Colleagues, I will be working on the cost analysis over the next week, so I'd like to make a motion then to continue this item for 1 week.
Supervisor Tang has made a motion to continue this item 1 week to the meeting of May 9th, 2017, seconded by Supervisor Ronan. Colleagues, can we take that without objection? Without objection, this item is continued to the meeting of May 9th, 2017. All right, let's go to roll call for introductions.
At this time, Supervisor Farrell is first up. Thank you. Supervisor Fewer. Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Kim. Supervisor Kim.
Oh.
Kim.
Oh,
Kim.
I thought you said Cohen, too. I thought we were going backwards. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Today, I am introducing a resolution to support She Decides, which is an international initiative started by the government of Netherlands in response to the restatement of the Mexico City policy, also known as the Global Gag Rule by the Trump administration. On January 23rd, 2017, Donald Trump, as did preceding Republican presidents, President Bush and Bush W., reinstated the Mexico City policy, which President Reagan first instated in 1984 during the International Conference on Population. Since then, the population has been revoked by each incoming Democratic president and then reinstated by each incoming Republican president. This initiative was founded by Lilian Plumen, Minister of Foreign Trade and Development Corporation of the Netherlands, and it seeks to mitigate the damage done to the reproductive health of women around the world. The global gag rule is often highlighted as a classic wedge issue when it comes to abortion, but in reality it does more than just preventing funds from going to all abortions. Here in the United States, per the Helms Amendment passed by Congress in 1973, U.S. already prohibits any type of foreign aid funds from going towards any abortion-related services, and this has been true regardless whether we've had a Democrat or Republican in the White House. But the global gag rule actually goes much further. It requires that any organization that even receives U.S. foreign aid funds, like USAID, that they have to certify that they don't use any of their own funds, non-U.S. funds, to provide abortion services, counseling patients, to let them know about the option of abortion, or advocating for liberalization of abortion laws. This means that Trump is using U.S. funds to stake out a supposed moral position, leveraging our contribution to impose ideological restrictions on women who lack the same access to information that we take for granted here in the U.S. This expansion to defund NGOs of global health funding because of abortion advocacy can also lead to unnecessarily taking away life-saving HIV and AIDS prevention, treatment, and response, along with the delivery of other critical health programs such as childhood vaccination, nutrition, malaria, and more from developing countries, making this literally quite a matter of life and death. Global health funding equals $9.5 billion versus just family planning funding of $600 million. There's a reason that the picture of Trump signing this executive order went viral, because he was surrounded, because while he signed off a decision that impacts the health of women in need worldwide, he was exclusively surrounded by wealthy white men when he put this executive order into place. This is the 21st century, that women should be making the choices about their own health, and the U.S. should be using our role as a world power to help them. In fact, according to an author, Paul Hawkins, who is writing a countdown on how we can truly reduce our carbon emissions production, the two solutions that would be the top contributor to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and reducing our carbon footprint is educating women and girls and providing family planning resources throughout the world. This is something that is important for the rights of women all across the globe, but also is incredibly important for the health of our world and our environment. Colleagues, ask for your support for this resolution, and also want to thank Supervisor Sandra Fewer, who has already signed on as a co-sponsor. And the rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, I'm looking forward to tomorrow's hearing on the power outage that crippled the northeast and northern parts of the city from the western addition to Chinatown, impacting some 87 to 90,000 PG&E customers and causing serious traffic delays. And I appreciate doing that with President Breed and learning how we can improve both city and PG&E response and learn from after the action analysis. The city's ability to respond in a timely fashion to emergencies continues to be on my mind. Back in January, President Breed and I held a hearing on emergency response times after revelations that in Chinatown there was an incident and no paramedics were available to respond. I was just looking at the controller's dashboard and I'm pleased to see that we are hitting 90%, our 90% target recently, and I think that's in some regard in response to the soup to nuts review that we did at that hearing and the working group that was convened as a result. I would like to employ that same effort as it relates to our 911 call center response time and know that there have been a number of incidents that are troubling and of concern that have been reported recently. I'm very pleased after having met with 911 staff earlier today that there is a robust effort to staff up, and as we saw based on the special commendation a few weeks ago, we have some exemplary staff, but hovering around at a 74% success rate relative to the target of 90% within 10 seconds is indeed troubling. So I am introducing today a hearing on 911 call center training and response times and look forward to working with you colleagues to address this issue in the months ahead. Of course, it is not surprising that Uber has decided to sue its hometown of San Francisco. Apparently, that seems to be the trend lately, as we saw with the lawsuit that Airbnb brought against the city based on the unanimous legislation that the Board of Supervisors passed in 2016, authored by then Supervisor Campos. But I think corporations should take note of the writing that is on the wall. You cannot circumvent laws that are designed to protect the public's safety and ensure a fair marketplace. And I want to, relative to the Uber matter, commend our Treasurer Tax Collector Jose Cisneros for standing up for all San Franciscans against the legendary bullying tactics of Uber, and who frankly have asked for special treatment at every step of the process. Businesses should be treated fairly and equally under the law, and that includes powerful special interests like Uber. And I also wanted to commend our MTA and San Francisco International Airport, Ed Riskin and Ivar Sataro, who have submitted some very, very strong comments yesterday, May 1st, to the California PUC with regard to background checks as it relates to TNCs. And finally, I want to commend the state legislative delegation, or I should say the city legislative body that unanimously took a position. Thank you, Supervisor Breed, who serves on the State Legislation Committee, took a unanimous position in opposition to Senate Bill 182, which would take away this and every other jurisdiction's ability to have Uber and TNCs obtain business licenses, which is really the entry point to how we get them into our system, whether it's short-term rental hosts or TNC drivers. And I am hopeful that our state legislative delegation, Assembly members Ting, Chu, and Senator Wiener will work with us to make sure that Senate Bill 182 is opposed and not passed. Finally, as we continue to grapple with how to improve and strengthen our inclusionary housing laws here, particularly in the face of sustained attacks to affordable housing tools that we are witnessing in Sacramento. Supervisor Kim and I are introducing a hearing request today to help address concerns around the city's ability to serve underrepresented communities through the existing BMR home ownership program. The 2017 area median income levels were released last week, and we saw a startling 7% jump. Based on HUD's calculations, we can expect annual AMI increases that will continue in 2018 and 2019 at a similar rate or higher. According to data provided by Home Ownership San Francisco, through the displacement of low and moderate income households in San Francisco is artificially inflating these numbers. The incredible turnout of families and household representatives at last week's Planning Commission meeting on this topic certainly seems to confirm that data. The Mayor's Office of Housing has been working on an access to housing report that identifies existing barriers to home ownership for low and moderate income households, and we'd like to bring that report to the Board of Supervisors for a presentation, including who is accessing housing and at what AMI and rent levels. Given the lack of discussion at the Technical Advisory Committee on this topic, this is critical information to have as we consider changes to our inclusionary housing law in the weeks ahead, and the rest I will submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. Supervisor Ronan.
I'm sorry, you skipped Supervisor Sheehy?
Oh, no, Ronan.
Ronan.
Oh, sorry.
R.S.
Sorry.
Colleagues, it has been over 2 years since a 4-alarm fire killed one resident and displaced over 60 low-income Latino residents from their building at 22nd and Mission Street. In the days following the fire, my predecessor, Supervisor David Campos, worked very hard to ensure that everyone who needed help got support from the city, including temporary housing. The majority of the families were housed on Treasure Island in previously empty public housing units, while others got temporary housing through our Good Samaritan program and our Fire Victim Housing Subsidy program. Unfortunately, some of these families will be losing their temporary housing at the end of this month because currently fire victims can only get help from the city for up to 2 years. I am introducing legislation today to help ensure that these low-income families in the Mission who have already been through so much don't now become homeless, and I wanted to thank Supervisor Fewer for co-sponsoring this legislation. This legislation amends the Fire Victims Assistance Fund created by President Breed and Supervisor Campos so that our most vulnerable low-income fire victims can be eligible for additional support beyond the 2-year deadline for an additional 2 years if necessary. It only applies to residents making less than 70% of the area median income who cannot return to their original unit and who have applied for permanent below-market rate housing through the Mayor's Office of Housing as a tenant displaced by a fire. It is up to us to protect our city's most vulnerable residents, and this small but important change will make a big difference in the lives of families who have already lost so much. I want to thank Ben Ames at HSA for all his help with these families and for helping us draft these amendments to make them meaningful, and for our partners at Causa Justa, Housing Rights Committee, and META for this work, for their work on this as well. The rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Ronan. Supervisor Safai.
Thank you, colleagues. Today I rise to introduce ordinance today that would cap the number of medical cannabis dispensaries in my district. We have had, within the last 3 months, 3 proposals come forward. In the last 2 years, we have had 5. And the residents of District 11 are currently served by 5 MCDs. We have 3 inside our boundaries and 2 right on our periphery, right on Ocean Avenue, which we share with District 7 and Supervisor Yee's district. The vast majority of residents of District 11 are not against access to medicinal marijuana. This is not an anti-medicinal marijuana proposal. It is simply about access and fairness and equity. And our district is very well served. The residents of District 11 have spoken overwhelmingly over and over and over again over the last 2.5, 3 years that they do not want any additional medical cannabis dispensaries in their district. They feel well served by them. And another push that comes from the type of businesses is the desire to be right on the border of San Mateo County. We share a Daly City border. And many of the businesses, literally the most recent proposal, half the building was in Daly City and half the building was in San Francisco. So we are putting this forward as 3 pending applications are coming forward. I met with an individual last week that was determined, regardless of what we said in terms of the appetite in our district to push forward. So we are submitting this today with full hope that everyone on this body would support and respect the desires of District 11 and cap our MCDs at 3. And the other thing I wanted to mention is we got some great news today. We introduced a resolution just a week ago on Chariot, the jitney service that they provide, and the Teamsters. We're going to talk more about this at GAO tomorrow, but we have gotten news that they have a full-fledged card check agreement. So we're super excited about that and really happy everyone that signed on to that and supported it. Thank you. The rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Safai. Supervisor Sheehy.
I have one item today to celebrate the 90th birthday of Tom Red McGarvey. For those who don't know Tom McGarvey, he's a native San Franciscan, born in Potrero Hill, and active in the city's Irish American community. He joined the Merchant Marines during World War II, and upon returning to San Francisco, became a small business leader. If you've ever been to Red's Java House on port property down at Piers 3032, you'll know that dock workers, tourists, downtown business folks, and Giants fans all congregate at Red's. In 1984, there was a massive fire at the location. Red's was saved. During development discussions at Piers 3032, there was a citywide consensus that we should preserve Red's on the waterfront. Although Tom no longer owns Red's, many San Franciscans will gather to celebrate his 90th birthday this Sunday. On behalf of the board, let's make it Tom Red McGarvey Day in San Francisco. The rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Sheehy. Supervisor Tang.
Submit.
Thank you. President Breed.
Thank you. Colleagues, today I'm introducing a resolution to urge our federal and state officials to urge each of you and the federal and state officials to support and commit to the Caltrans Peninsula Corridor Electrification Project. Supervisor Peskin, why are you looking at me like that? Caltrans operates the third most congested area in the nation, serving 65,000 riders a day. It provides a much-needed alternative to the heavily congested freeways. Dramatic ridership increase has strained the system, and many peak-hour trains operate over maximum capacity. The fleet is over 30 years old, and the rail system, the rail corridor, is over 150 years old. They both clearly need replacing. The Caltrans corridor is arguably the most economically productive area in the state. Now, after several decades of planning, Caltrans is opposed to implement a $1.9 billion Peninsula Corridor electrification project. This will allow it to become a modern electric commuter rail, increasing capacity, improving train performance, offer cleaner and quieter service. It will also provide substantial environmental benefits by eliminating over 176,000 metric tons of CO2 and removing 619 daily vehicle miles from the region's congested roadways. Over $1.3 billion in local, regional, state, and federal non-core capacity funds have been secured for the project. Contracts were awarded in September of 2016, and design is underway. And the project now awaits the final funding component to start construction, a $647 million grant from the Federal Transit Administration Core Capacity Program, a program designed to make investments in existing transit system projects that expand capacity and accommodate growing ridership. On February 17th of this year, Caltrans completed the last step in the FTA core capacity process and was eligible for the final signature to be executed. FTA then announced that the execution of the core capacity grant would be delayed until the determination of whether the project would be included in the president's budget proposal was made. Now, This is clearly what I believe not only an attack on San Francisco, it's an attack on California as a whole. I, along with Supervisor Sheehy and Ronan, were in D.C. last week. We met with our federal delegation as well as staff members of one of the Republican congressmen. And, you know, it was really frustrating that we were, I think, about 1 week away from starting this project to have this current new administration deliberately rip a commitment away from the Bay Area in this way. It is really sad and unfortunate that such an amazing infrastructure project is being held hostage. And the argument that we took to our nation's capital is that this is not just going to impact jobs locally here. We're talking about 9,600 jobs, 1,300 of which will be outside of California in states like Florida, Wisconsin, Colorado, Virginia, and Utah, where the project is a driving force for construction of a rail car manufacturing facility that will provide 550 permanent jobs. This project has widespread bipartisan support from a growing coalition of federal, state, regional, and local stakeholders committed to creating these jobs, investing in aging infrastructure, and addressing congestion between San Francisco and San Jose. I want to thank my co-sponsors, our TA chair, Supervisor Aaron Peskin, as well as Supervisor Ronan and Sheehy, who, again, were with us in D.C. trying to advocate for these funds. And with this resolution today, we are strongly urging the FTA to approve the full funding grant agreement for this project. And we are urging our local, regional, and state leaders, along with our federal lobbyist, Eve O'Toole, and our entire California congressional delegation, to continue to aggressively express their support and push so that the commitment that was made is fulfilled. And this is going to be a battle, along with a lot of other issues that we will be dealing with this current administration in Washington, D.C. The region cannot continue to thrive without equipping this 150-year-old rail corridor with a modernized transit system capable of accommodating the current ridership of over 60,000 individuals throughout this area, and projected to increase to 100,000 in the not-so-distant future. And please join me, colleagues, in urging our state and federal support for this project, and the rest I submit.
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Cohen. Madam President, seeing no other names on the roster, that completes roll call for introductions.
All right, Madam Clerk, let's go to public comment.
At this time, the public may now address the entire Board of Supervisors for up to 2 minutes on items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Board, including the March 21st, 2017 Board meeting minutes and the item on the adoption without reference to committee calendar. Public comment is not allowed when an item has been previously subject to public comment at a Board committee. Pursuant to the Board's rules, please direct your remarks to the Board as a whole, not to individual supervisors and not to the audience. Speakers using translation assistance will be allowed twice the amount of time. And if you would like to display your document on the overhead projector, please state such to SFG TV and remove the document when the screen returns to live coverage of the meeting.
Thank you. First speaker, please.
أيها الإخوة العرب الأفاضل الموجودين معنا هنا في أمريكا، تحية أخوية أهديها لكم من كل قلبي. وفي الحقيقة إحنا ما نقدرش إننا ننكر إن علاجنا هنا في أمريكا أحسن بكتير من علاجنا في بلدنا الأصلية. دراسة، تعمق، بآلات حديثة لسه مش موجودة عندنا في بلدنا. وهنا الأطباء بيتحدوا بعض بإنقاذ مرضاهم أيا كان بدون تحيز أو تعصب عنصري. لكن في ناس كتيرة بتشتغل معاهم بينتهزوا الفرص للسرقة والنصب، وده اللي حصل ليا من حوالي 4 أسابيع أو أكتر. الموظف اللي عينته الحكومة لرعايتي سرق تليفوني والكاميرا باعتبار إني راجل كبير في السن، لكن وقع في شر أعماله وانكشف أمره حرامي ونصاب وانطرد من شغله لأنهم أثبتوا إن هو غير شريف. Ladies and gentlemen, I was here the last time, as you remember, on 24 January. I miss you. You are my family. Always I said that. I am not lonely in this country. I believe that we're related to each other. But what happened, I survived with 9-time heart attack. And the city, God bless her, hired some guy, they said, caregiver. The Mr. Caregiver, he's supposed to take care for me. He steal my phone. He steal my phone. He put my life in jeopardy. I can't contact my nurse. I can't contact my doctor because he take it. And when I try to put it, the camera video, to have investigation between me and between him, I found the camera disappear also. Now, I would like to tell you, if the gentleman, he has been hired to me from Homebridge or IHSS or from the city of San Francisco, I have right to sue them because they are responsible to hire people, steal the old people like us. I am here. You know me. I am here in this place 30 years. Fight for the homeless who can't fight for themselves. But I tell you now, I tell you today, I am going to die to fight for my own life. I fight to prove it, that the man, the city hiring him to help us, steal us. How this can? The computer can prove it. He said in Oakland that he found my telephone. He told to the police, I sold the phone for him. And where the evidence? The evidence in the computer or Metro, 900 Venus Street. The evidence is there. Wake up and try to help me if you can, as I help the city. I help the city for 30 years. Now I need you to take care for me for 30 seconds. 30 seconds, you can save it, my life. I can't do anything more than I wanted to support me like I support you before. Our supervisor, the new over supervisor, the old over supervisor.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Thank you. As I was saying, we are celebrating or commemorating the 75th anniversary of events of World War II and how they were impacted or affected San Francisco. I have here a front cover from Saturday Evening Post showing an aircraft carrier passing under the Bay Bridge with a cable car and many sailors in the foreground. Now, this happens to coincide exactly now with the famous Tokyo raid by Doolittle in April of '42, and which was a tremendous morale booster for the United States. We had been losing steadily for 3 or 4 months, one battle after another, in the early phases of the war, and this was a great, as I say, morale booster. When President Roosevelt, who conceived of this mission, when he was asked, where did this raid originate from? He said Shangri-La, which was then a popular novel and a movie about a semi-mythical Central Asian kingdom. People accepted that as the answer. The actual fact was the Hornet and Doolittle's bombers sailed out of San Francisco Bay from Alameda on April 2nd, and we were the base for this famous raid. Before going, Doolittle gave his men permission to have one night on the town, and many of them ended up going to the top of the mark, which was an American iconic, one of the leading icons of America at that time. One unfortunate result of the raid was that one of the flyers landed in China, where the improvised airfields had been provided.
Thank you. Thank you. Next speaker, please. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
I was paying keen attention to the Rules Committee. And I'm very sad that you supervisors in general are allowing certain things to happen. Now, as you know, when I say that most of y'all are not bad, some of y'all have your heart in the right place. We should not allow politics to come when it comes to our commission, especially the police commission. And we're going to have a meeting tomorrow, and the advocates will be there, and they're going to be discussing in general and in particular about the selection of our candidates. Supervisors must represent everybody. Some of you are involved in politics. I see how y'all are talking about some train system or whatever, but really, we've been behind that, and some of y'all who are on the Bay Area Air Quality Management District know that these discussions come over there. We listen to y'all, so you know that we advocates pay attention to it. So it's not, but some of our Board of Supervisors, some are totally out of sync. Our congressional person and our senator need to do more. And if they cannot represent, they should just move out of the way. But having said that, you supervisors, the decent ones, please see that the right commissioners are on the police commission. I'll be addressing the police commission tomorrow, and I will be addressing the police commission in a series of articles so that everybody gets the message. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Tom Gilberti, changes, Airbnb, Uber and Lyft. How many thousands of them are on the street versus our taxis? Maybe we can make a change, and the amount of taxis that we have going out per day, we issue permits to Uber and Lyft drivers. While the city comes to terms with its information, data and information, and how we can reclaim our streets, make them safe for us, and at the same time, maybe we need to protect ourselves from billionaires trying to make monopolies of the taxi services of the cities across the world. Is our cab company a resource we need to protect? I think we do. LA once had trolleys. I think they would love to have them back. They lost them to a new technology of General Motors and Firestone and the oil companies. Changes, housing. We need to re-envision our housing. Public needs, from the homeless, Section 8, less talented, seniors, genetic disorders, homes for navigational graduates, and part of that has to be part of all of our private housing, a bigger part. The number one goal is to build our healthy communities, to help everybody grow that's living there, the young and the old, stay and grow old together. And add in a new crop of people that'll help move our city and our society and our neighborhoods and our communities forward together. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
On item 15, I guess I can't make more comment. Is that the rules?
Item 15 has already been called.
Yeah, okay. So
No more public comment is allowed on that item.
Okay, well, let's, in regards to really bad things that happen to people, like being killed, I can't help think about the greatest tragedy the world has ever seen, and that is the death of Jesus Christ. In Romans 5, it says, in due time, Christ died for the ungodly. It had to happen. It was at the determinate counsel and foreknowledge of God that this did happen, according to Isaiah 53 and Psalm 22 and Daniel 9. It had to happen at that precise year, at that time. And that's the most dreadful, terrible thing that could happen to anybody. And he's the only one that's ever been righteous. So that's the greatest tragedy. And I can't help but think about Caiaphas, the high priest, and how after he had raised Lazarus from the dead, he had been dead for 4 days. They were really following him then. They wanted to talk with Lazarus, of course. Wouldn't you like to talk with somebody who's been dead for 4 days? I would. So they had a council together, and they had one point on the agenda: what are we going to do with Jesus? What are we going to do with Jesus? And one priest said this, the other guy said that, and then Caiaphas says, hey, I'm the high priest around here. You know nothing at all, nor consider that it's expedient for you that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation perish not. See, that was a glorious statement, unknowing, that he made, that exceeded Paul. When Paul said he made him to be sin, who knew no sin, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him by free grace. I heard on family radio R.C. Sproul yesterday talking about...
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to provide public comment? Seeing none, public comment is now closed. Madam Clerk, let's go to the items for adoption without reference to committee.
The for adoption without committee reference is comprised of item 23, which is a resolution to declare May 6, 2017 to be a day of inclusion for the City and County of San Francisco in recognition of the harm caused by the Chinese Exclusion Act and immigration policies based on racial and religious intolerance.
Supervisor Tang.
Thank you. So I am going to be speaking on behalf of Supervisor Fewer, who has laryngitis, and also Supervisor Yee, who is not here today. But also as a co-sponsor and speaking on an issue that's really important to all of us here. So on May 6, 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act was signed into law, prohibiting immigration into the United States on the basis of ethnicity. The act was sadly renewed in 1892, 1902, and was made permanent in 1904, denying Chinese immigrants a pathway to citizenship for more than 60 years. The Chinese Exclusion Act was based on racial hostility, but over a century later, our country watches as President Trump's executive orders limit visas, refugee resettlements, and target immigrant communities within the United States using very similar rhetoric. This resolution reclaims May 6 as a day of inclusion in recognition of the harm caused by the Chinese Exclusion Act and immigration policies based on racial and religious intolerance. As Chinese American members of the Board of Supervisors, we proudly stand with the full board today in condemning this terrible history, as well as Trump's executive orders that discriminate on the basis of American members of the board, on the basis of race, ethnicity, religion, or country of origin. By declaring May 6 to be a day of inclusion, San Francisco will reaffirm its commitment to welcoming and including immigrant and refugee communities in our city. And I'd like to thank Supervisor Fewer and her legislative aide, Chelsea Boyard, for spearheading this important resolution.
Thank you, Supervisor Tang. Supervisor Kim.
Thank you, President Breed. And I just want to acknowledge and thank Supervisor Fewer and her office for putting together this resolution for a day of inclusion. I do think that, in light of many of the threats that our president is making on different segments of our community, In particular, his threats are about a Muslim ban and a registry. It is particularly important for Asian Americans and Chinese Americans to stand up. Historically, Chinese Americans were the only group that had ever been asked to register with the local government in 1892. And this is a history that we should all know about and also understand how San Francisco was part of the resistance. In fact, it was the Chinese 6 companies that stood up and told Chinatown residents to not register, that it was something that they should challenge. And that history is here in San Francisco. And the first ever Exclusion Act banning immigration based on country ethnicity was, of course, in China, and later followed to many of the countries in Asia over the next 50 years until the 1965 Immigration Act, which eliminated all these racial quotas. What we're hearing from our president today is a step back to a time over 50 years ago when this country did discriminate immigrants based on ethnicity and national origin. This is exactly the direction that we don't want to move in, and I think it's important that we remind our country of this history where we had done something that was incorrect and then corrected that mistake and moved onwards. So thank you again, Supervisor, for moving this forward, and I would love to add my name as a co-sponsor.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam President. Today, the day where the Chinese 6 companies, or the Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association, gets a new presiding president, I would like to associate myself with the words of the previous speakers and ask to be added as a co-sponsor.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. And with that, seeing no other names on the roster, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
On item 23, Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Fewer. Fewer, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Ronan. Ronan, aye. Supervisor Safai. Safai, aye. Supervisor Sheehy.
Aye.
Sheehy, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Cohen. Cohen, aye. There are 10 ayes.
The resolution is adopted unanimously. All right, colleagues, we have a 5 p.m. special order, which we cannot call until 5 o'clock. So we are done with all other board business, and we will recess until 5 p.m. And at that time, we will finish our 5 p.m. special order, and we'll adjourn after that business has been conducted. And with that, we are on recess. All right, everyone, we are back from recess, and at this time, just wanted to let the public know that we have completed our entire agenda other than our 5 p.m. special order, and that is what we are here for today. Sitting as a committee of the whole, Madam Clerk, please call all of those items 18 through 20.
16, 17, 18, and 19.
Oh, yes, thank you. 16 through 20.
19.
Oops, 16 through 19.
Items 16 and 17 were scheduled pursuant to motion number 17055, approved on April 11th, 2017, and items 18 and 19 were scheduled pursuant to motion number 17056, also approved on April 11th, 2017. Items 16 and 17 is a public hearing and a resolution to consider objections to a report of assessment costs submitted by the Director of Public Works for inspection and or repair of blighted properties ordered through the Accelerated Sidewalk Abatement Program. And items 18 and 19 are public hearings and a resolution to consider objections to a report of assessment costs submitted by the Director of Public Works for sidewalk and curb repairs through the Sidewalk Inspection and Repair Program.
Okay, colleagues, today's Committee of the Whole is being conducted to consider objections to the report of the assessment costs submitted by the Director of Department of Public Works for inspection and or repair of blighted properties through the Accelerated Sidewalk Abatement Program and for sidewalk and curb repairs through the Sidewalk Inspection and Repair Program, and to consider approving the underlying resolution. So let's open this hearing. And first, we will hear from the department.
Good evening. My name is Michael Lennon, and I'm appearing on behalf of San Francisco Public Works and the Accelerated Sidewalk Abatement Program. The program, some of you may know, inspects sidewalks in residential and commercial areas and expedites repairs for sidewalks found to be in poor condition. Under State Highway Code 5611 and Municipal Public Works Code 706, the fronting property owner is responsible for the repair and maintenance of the sidewalk abutting their property. We inspect and notify property owners when defects are found that need to be abated. Property owners are charged inspection fees under this program and can elect to have a city contractor perform the necessary abatement work or hire a private contractor. If the property owner elects to have the sidewalk work completed by the city contractor, or in instances where no response is received and the requisite repairs have not been made within the time specified, the city will make the repairs and invoice the property owner for the inspection and abatement costs. When a property owner fails to pay the invoice, or when a property owner elects to have the inspection fees and repair costs placed on their property tax, Public Works will submit an assessment for the overdue amount to the Board of Supervisors for consideration to include in the next regular tax bill. In the last year, we mailed 365 invoices, and 320, which is about 88%, were paid. As of May 2nd, 2017, 49 invoices totaling $64,471.39 were removed from the original list that was provided to you through payments made during that period. In this report, we are submitting 32 invoices totaling $43,562.23, including the 12% administrative fee. It is here that the department requests the board's approval of the list for assessment of blighted properties.
Thank you. Colleagues, are there any questions for the department? Seeing none, we will open this up to public comment for members of the public who'd like to provide public comment on this particular item. And just to make sure you know that even if you don't want to speak during public comment, we will allow an opportunity for you to have a discussion directly with the department in order to address your particular issue. So it is your option if you want to make comments during public comment. So first speaker, please.
Good morning, members of the board. This is with regards to notice to repair ASA PP 01073737. Location of the property is 267 Topaz Way here in San Francisco. I'm here on behalf of my mother, who's 93 years old and is the property owner. She received a notice with regards to clean up some weeds that are on the back of her property. And this is a stretch of about 20 to 25 feet, which is also owned by the adjacent property owner. We received this notice on January 18th of 2017. On January 25th of 2017, I telephoned the inspector and left a message with him indicating that there was a separate inspector for the adjacent property who also inspected the same 20 to 25 feet of section, and indicated to my neighbor that he would waive the assessment fee so long as we cleared up the weeds within 15 days of the notice. Now take it, this is in January of 2017, soon after the storms, so most of San Francisco looked like a jungle. And actually, this inspector told my neighbor that he wouldn't have even cited or written up anything with regards to the weeds, but it was a neighbor below us who had made a complaint. So there's very little weeds actually intruding onto the sidewalk. I never received a call back from my inspector. On January 30th, I sent an email to my inspector, and I have a copy for the board. And attached to the email, I had indicated I'm following up with my voicemail. Please let me know. The neighbor and their inspector indicated that they would waive the fee so long as we cleaned it up.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. There will be an opportunity for you to talk to the department after this hearing is conducted. So if you could stick around.
Sure.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. And if there are any other members of the public that'd like to provide any feedback, please line up to your right. Next speaker.
Hi, yes, my name's Tom Medden. My husband and I, we own 2179 12th Avenue. We purchased our house in 1999. The Bureau of Forestry, a city department, planted a Chinese elm tree in the city sidewalk in front of our house under the previous owner and indicated that they would maintain it. In 2007, the tree roots broke through the sewer pipe to our house. It cost us $5,000 to make repairs. In 2013, Public Works informed us that the tree roots had damaged the sidewalk. We were shocked when they told us that we would be responsible for the repairs from the tree roots that the City Bureau of Forestry had planted and agreed to maintain. We even learned from Public Works that the Chinese elm tree that the city planted had such an invasive root system that they will no longer allow this tree to be planted. One would think if anyone would know not to plant a Chinese elm tree, it would be a city arborist. At the first hearing in 2013, the hearing officer told me the clock stopped and I did not need to do anything until I received a written ruling. Afterwards, I received email from Public Works stating that they knew I was wrong. I kept on saying I wanted a written ruling, as I was promised. I was told the city attorney had looked at the ordinance and found it questionable. All the time, I kept asking for a written ruling. I never could get one for 3 years. Last year, I came to a hearing similar to this one. At that time, I had the same request from the original hearing. Any kind of written ruling, anyone. About 2 months ago, I received the order that I passed out to anyone here. Please note, there was no date on the order. It is also missing the name of the hearing officer. If you look at the back of the order, if you would please, the Department of Public Works has put the words invalid signature.
Sir, thank you. Thank you for your comments. Again, there will be an opportunity for you to talk to a Department of Public Works representative after the hearing is held. Supervisor Peskin.
Madam President, I don't even see this address that the gentleman referred to, 2179 12th Avenue, unless I'm missing it. I don't see it
It's on page 1 of the SIRP.
But he passed out a separate letter that we got that was distributed, and it's not on this list.
No.
Is that what you're referring to, Supervisor Peskin, the distributed letter?
I don't see it on either list. 2179 12th Street.
Well, if you can stand to the side, we're going to take the next
found
speaker.
It is on the SIPR. It is. It's line, a few lines up from the bottom of page 1 of 2. I found it.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Brad Burke, and we live at 609 Connecticut Street in Potrero Hill. And we were here in 2015, and the sidewalk was cracked, and brought it up to the DPW, and it's still cracked. And all we get is they sent a subcontractor back to patch it, and I said, well, we're not going to accept that. He went away. He's saying he's going to talk to his supervisor. They never came back. All of a sudden, we get a note on our door or on our building saying they're going to put it on our taxes. Well, we're not going to accept that, and if they proceed to do that, or if that is proceeding, then we're going to have to get legal action, because we're not going to pay this bill. And this is my letter.
Thank you. Are there any other members who'd like to make public comment specifically regarding this hearing? Seeing none, public comment is now closed. And for the members of the public, as well as those who have not spoken, who are here for this particular item, The Department of Public Works, gentlemen, can you stand up and identify yourself, please? Is here to talk to you about your specific issue. Since we have no other items to discuss, we will stay in the chamber and we will take a recess while you consult with him on your item, and then we will return at that time. So with that, we will take a recess. Okay, we are now back from recess. Department of Public Works, you have an amended report.
With the amended copy, which should reflect the following changes. With respect to the ASAP list, 267 Topaz Way, the fee associated with that property is waived. We found there was communications. We were going through an internal personnel change at the time, and the communication slipped through the cracks with the transition from one inspector to the next. So the constituent who came in and had provided documentation showing that he had reached out and associated with that.
Okay.
Moving on with ASAP, we also have the 163 Edinburgh. They have 2 invoices associated with that property, and they have entered into a payment plan to pay off those invoices.
Okay.
And then moving on to SERP, 2772 Sacramento Street. They have also entered into a payment plan to resolve that outstanding invoice. And then the final 2 properties also for SERP, which we were unable to come to a resolution, and the department is recommending that we move forward with adding them to as a special assessment, is with respect to 2179 12th Avenue. This is the issue that was public comment was made on regarding the tree that had been planted in front of the house. Based off of all the records and documentation that we have, there are no records showing that this was a city-maintained tree. It has always been a privately maintained tree. It's not a Chinese elm. It's actually a glossy, pardon me here, a glossy privet tree, which is recommended by Friends of the Urban Forest. The Chinese elm is also on an accepted list. It's not a banned tree for invasive roots. But both based off of the records that we have and the documentation, has always been a privately maintained tree. And based off of Public Works Code 706, as well as Public Works Code 805, maintenance of the tree in terms of trimming is on the property owner, as well as any sidewalk defects caused by the tree adjacent to the tree basin is the responsibility of the property owner to maintain. So based on the fact that it was always a privately maintained tree, we have no records suggesting otherwise, and the sidewalk defects are attributable to this privately maintained tree. We recommend that this property be added to the special assessment list.
Or be kept on the list.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
And then 609 Connecticut Street, also on the SERP list. This concerned cracks surrounding tree basins on the concrete. It was at the 90s, so tree basins were expanded when this property, around the tree basins at this property, and there's cracking off of the 90-degree angles. We had the contractor go out and repatch the area, and after that, the cracks apparently have reappeared. We offered to re-pour around the tree basins, but property owner expressed concerns that it would not match the other sidewalks, and we offered floated the potential of a discount in order to account for the cracking as less than a perfect job, and neither of those options were acceptable to the property owner. So based off of that, we also recommend that this property stays on the assessment list.
Okay. Any other comments?
That concludes the issues that we addressed out there.
Okay. Colleagues, do you have any questions? Okay. Seeing none, this hearing has been held and is now filed. And we will need to amend the current documents we have before us, keeping in mind that this changes the total amounts at the bottom. Do you have the total, or have you totaled them out?
We have not told them out at this point.
Okay. Mr. Givner, can we amend this without totaling them out in the existing resolution?
Deputy City Attorney John Givner, all you have to do is accept the new document, which will become part of the file, and then approve the resolution reflecting the new document.
Okay. Is there a motion to accept the document? Moved by Supervisor Tang, seconded by Supervisor Sheehy. Can we do that without objection? Without objection, this will be adjusted to be included in the record. And colleagues, we have before us items 17 and 19. And Madam Clerk, on those items, please call the roll.
On items 17 and 19, Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Fewer. Fewer, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Peskin. Peskin, absent. Supervisor Ronan. Ronan, aye. Supervisor Safai. Safai, aye. Supervisor Sheehy.
Aye.
Sheehy, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Cohen. Cohen, aye. There are 9 ayes.
Those items are adopted as amended unanimously. Madam Clerk, please read the in memoriams.
I have no in memoriams today, Madam President.
Okay, with that, I was under the understanding that Supervisor Sheehy, did you have an in memoriam that you did during roll call?
I didn't do it as an immemorial, but a declaration of a day. For,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, colleagues, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.